all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Feature Podcast here on the internet. I'm one of your hosts, Dean, joined by my other host, David, where every week we go around, try and find really good pairings of films, talk about directors, talk about themes, talk about good stuff in cinema. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Dean. All silliness aside, this is an episode I've been extremely excited for ever since we planned it.
Yeah, because this is your... I don't know if he's your favorite director, but he's your favorite working director right now.
Yeah, so as everybody knows, this is a continuation of our Directors Month as a part of our first month of themed months on the podcast for this year. And I chose this particular writer-director, Martin McDonagh, because the two movies that we've chosen are pretty much his most popular movies.
Mm-hmm.
I would also venture to say they are some of the best crime movies to have been made in the past 10 years. Or I guess one of them is a little bit more than 10 years old now.
Would you say best 20, best since 2000?
Yeah, if you had to put together a I'd say top 10.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, at least one of them makes it for the crime films, because the other one, it's labeled a crime film. It's not really. I think it's more of a drama in a general sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it does very much so capture such a touching story, which may not seem touching on face value, but it really is when you dig down to the bones of it. I guess to get the cat out of the bag, as they say.
Yeah, let people know what's going on.
We're watching two films by Martin McDonagh, Irish-British writer-director from, well, Ireland.
It's a pretty good place to be
Popularly
from.
known, popularly known mostly for his playwriting abilities. But we are watching two of his hit movies in Bruges and Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri.
Yes. So I know Three Billboards was nominated for a bunch of Oscars. I don't know if In Bruges was. Do you know if In Bruges was nominated for anything?
No, and Bruges never really made much of a splash with American audiences. And even still, I don't think it's quite the caliber that would ever make it like Oscar worthy. I could see this film going on to be like a Golden Globe comedy winner, something like this, but it never did.
It's the kind of movie that it would probably win like a bunch of festivals.
Yeah, that I certainly think is true. I'm going to look up the list because I'm sure it's lengthy. So here I have a BAFTA award for Best Original Screenplay for In Bruges.
Mm-hmm.
We did get a Golden Globe Award for Best Actor.
Is that
That being Colin Farrell.
my boy? Also, so we were talking a little bit before the podcast about Colin Farrell, and apparently I've only seen his bad movies. So I thought In Bruges was going to be a terrible movie, and then I watched it, and I was like, no, Colin Farrell is a great actor with a terrible agent. That's what it is. I figured it out.
You know, I think it's a case of like Colin Farrell is one of these actors that is totally not afraid of the cash grab, because in most recent memory, like I said, he's been in that live action adaptation of Disney's Dumbo, which I'm not going to knock it here nor there because I haven't seen it, and some of those live action adaptations can get quite raw, apparently. And Dumbo's a good movie, so I'm not gonna knock it. So, but yeah, apparently there's been some other ones that have been doozies.
Yeah.
But all that aside, I think that he's still a fantastic actor, especially in this movie where he's like the best little golden retriever that you can ever wish for.
Yeah.
Another one I recommend for anybody who wants some good Colin Farrell acting is The Lobster. Go check that out. But
why don't we tell people what these movies are about?
A depressed assassin awaits orders in a foreign, bleak hideout with his partner after an accidental execution of a child on his first job. A grieving mother erects 3 billboards to send a message of justice to the town police after the death of her daughter.
And then comedy ensues because they're all terrible people. You forgot that part.
You say that, but I maintain there's always has to be this clear division when watching a movie or even like reading a book, anything in a story.
Yeah.
Are they bad characters or are they just bad people?
I don't think they're bad characters. I think they're just bad people.
Certainly.
Yeah.
But I think that's, in a way, I think that's why I love this movie, because Martin Scorsese is known for doing this, right? He's known for taking evil people and making you, if not sympathize with them, at least understand them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what, to name a particular tentpole, Goodfellas is all about. You're trying to understand why the gangster, who is a horrible, horrible human being,
a wife beater, drug addict, murderer, all these things and more. Actually,
why he does what he does.
Why he does what he does. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think it was interesting watching watching In Bruges and 3 Billboards, where in Bruges you understand why these terrible people feel the way they do, and then you watch 3 Billboards and you understand it, but then it's like an action thing. We're gonna get really deep into this in a moment, but I guess we'll start with the basic, opening questions. So, how'd you watch them? What order do you watch them? Good pairing. Maybe some strengths and some weaknesses that you found. And we're going to go through and we're going to try and answer them. So, how'd you watch them?
So, I watched it in Bruges to 3 Billboards. I think that's kind of the way you should watch them. They're different. They're 2 movies with different tones. In Bruges is very obviously more on the side of McDonagh's black comedy sense of mind, whereas 3 Billboards is more in his sense of mind to be a drama. McDonagh comes from the stage. He was a playwright in London and I think came over to New York at some point in his career before even breaking into movies. But has always been somebody who's maintained a really good sense of black comedy when on the stage and in his writing. Some of his earlier plays, which you might like, Dean, are kind of about the Catholic movement in Northern Ireland and this kind of question of why do we trust religion when it still lets so many terrible things happen. But he gets like a lot of this, just as you've observed in these movies, this really interesting analysis, this comedic analysis of such horrific things through the dialogue. And it's one of the things I really admire about McDonagh.
Yeah, I can get behind that, because In Bruges is a great like black comedy, and it's real. It's funny. There's like so much like absurdity going on, and the characters still feel like real people. I think that's an issue with a lot of comedies, in general, where the jokes land, but the characters are not real people. So you don't really care about the story. In this, you care a lot about the story, and the comedy also works. Also, some people call 3 Billboards a comedy. What is 3 Billboards a comedy?
Oh, no. I mean, have you heard that?
Yes, yeah. Actually, if you go to IMDb and like Rotten Tomatoes, it's labeled a comedy crime drama.
That's all over the place.
Yeah.
I would certainly say it's a drama, first and foremost.
Yeah.
I believe McDonagh's original intention, because it's half based on a personal event he went through, half based on a true story, and then the rest is kind of made up by him, especially because Ebbing, Missouri is not a real place. I believe they shot the movie in Asheville, North Carolina. But he, like that movie he wanted to do because he wanted to do a movie about America, which, him being technically he's still foreign, though I believe he has done plenty more in New York in the playwriting scene, and then has since tried to break into American movies.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time in 2008 when the movie came out, so I guess also while he had the script for years, and they probably started making this movie around 2016,
Mm-hmm.
if you go by like what a normal movie is on a timetable for.
Yeah.
It was kind of during this really particular time in America that I think we are kind of seeing the climax of right now. But
It's a thing.
if you remember, the middle of the country was certainly one that hadn't gotten a lot of screen time.
Yeah. And the middle of the country kind of took that and exploded into a lot of interesting stuff. But this ain't a politics podcast. But yeah.
No, and I think that I certainly think that that's why I like this movie as well, is it doesn't focus on the politics of the middle of the country so much. It's there. You can't avoid it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still just about these people's lives.
Yeah. And this is like it's very interesting that about Three Billboards is that it takes place in the American South, and it's written by a person who's not American, and I would hesitate to say that he went to the American South to do a lot of research for this.
You'd be surprised.
I'd be surprised. Okay. Yeah.
Because that's the other thing too, is this film received a lot of praise for how well it captures that area of the country.
I mean, are you sure, dog? Like, I got family from the South, and this is a little sketch to me.
Well, so, and this is kind of the thing that I dispute a little bit about.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is that the first thing is it's not necessarily the actual South. It's in Missouri, which is a little bit more Midwestern,
Yeah,
middle of the country. It's like you wouldn't label Kansas the South or Oklahoma. The South is a little bit more towards the eastern seaboard, like Georgia, like Mississippi, like
you're just
that's
naming all the states that seceded from the Union right there.
well, because I think that's like the historical view of what the nation as a whole sees as the South, but that kind of Dust Bowl area is a little bit more what I think he's going for in this. A lot of places that are like mining towns, places that are based on an industry that was like popular 50 years ago, and now people live here because their parents lived there. Things that are a little bit more American like that.
He's trying to pull kind of like a Stephen King kind of like area where this is basically every rural town USA, more or less. It's just this one has a certain draw to it,
especially because like we said, Ebbing doesn't actually exist.
Yeah.
But I think it gets a generalized version of what small town like Main Street USA America looks like now.
Okay. You're gonna tell I'm gonna have some points about Three Billboards, but I guess let's just start jumping into talking about these movies. Yeah. So where do you want to start? You want to start with how we watched them, because I also watched In Bruges in Three Billboards in that order.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to know kind of your thoughts on the pair, because I guess to finish up my analysis of it is I thought they were a great pair. I would recommend this pair to anybody, because it's also, no offense, he has another film called Seven Psychopaths.
The one with,
I haven't seen it.
Christopher Walken. It's like a big ensemble.
Yeah, Colin Farrell's in that one as well. Sam Rockwell is in that one. I haven't seen it. The premise of it kind of looks a little different from what his other stuff is to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be interested to see it, but I just think, again, that if you were to pick any of his movies, these two go together. So yeah, what did you think about the pair?
I thought the pair was solid. I feel that both of them in a vacuum are great movies. Or even in their not great moments, they're still very good. I don't think either of these movies are bad by any stretch of the definition. The point to where I found issue is that they are very tonally different films. And granted, that makes sense. They're made almost 10 years apart from each other. There's very few directors that can maintain a particular vision, tone thing across multiple like films for a very long period of time. Even like even like really good auteurs, like their opinions evolve and whatnot over time, which is what he's doing. But it feels like In Bruges is a very like good, well polished, super like fun black comedy that he was probably rumenting on for years and years and years, and was like, this is the movie that's gonna break me out into making movies. And Three Billboards feels like the movie he worked on to win awards, right? Where In Bruges felt a lot more personal, a lot more, I guess, gritty, a lot more like down to earth, a lot more to his sensibilities. And Three Billboards felt a lot more like he was working towards a goal, and that was to win awards. And he knew the stories he knew the story that was in him to tell to get that done. And I might just be kind of cynical about it, but I feel because of that they don't pair super well together.
I can agree with that the tonal differences probably hurt the pair. Because I think, as we've reviewed before, a double feature is good when you can kind of build off one another.
Yeah.
And aside from liking Martin McDonagh, I don't know if you're going to build off each other quite so good.
I feel if you were looking for a great director of the, post 2000s, this is a guy you can definitely get a good double feature out of, and this is a great double feature.
Yeah, I think the only other two that I would look to for that kind of criteria is like the Safdie brothers, particularly lately, have been knocking it out of the park with their stylistic choices.
Mm-hmm.
Or like Nolan, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Everybody's like, Nolan, that guy. He's just art house Michael Bay at this point.
A little bit. And but particularly what I enjoy so much about McDonagh, in why you'd be kind of surprised about the intention with these movies, is that he's a very humble writer-director.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of his interviews, in his work especially, he's kind of like the Coens in a similar way, where it's just kind of about, we have a particular thing we want, we're going to do it, we know it's good because it's just the formula of our process.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if McDonagh is quite so mega-minded like they are, because they have like this sixth sense for filmmaking that we've obviously seen since doing Blood Simple and Raising Arizona.
They're the kind of the directors that live in a joint hive mind that has every noir and crime film ever made in it.
Yeah,
that is the Coen brothers.
But yeah, McDonagh has, in all the interviews I've seen, is just a guy who, like, he grew up liking filmmaking, didn't even know he was going to be a playwright. He was like, never really thought about it until I saw this one play with Al Pacino in it when in London, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess I kind of want to write some of those. He did that, found wild success in England. He actually, this is a fun fact, held at one point, I don't know if he still holds, the record for the most concurrent plays running at the Globe Theatre, or something like this.
Really?
With Shakespeare. So that's 4 at a time.
That's badass.
So yeah, that's like the level that he's at in England, at least, is worth praising, and I think that earned him a spot in the American market. And certainly still there's to kind of get a little closer into, if anybody's interested, and I recommend it totally, because it has a lot of the same, it's the same tone as In Bruges, and it has Brendan Gleeson as the main character, who everybody loves Brendan Gleeson. I mean, come on.
That's good.
Is his short film he made in like 2004, which he won an Oscar for Best Narrative Short Film, Six Shooter. It's kind of long. It's 26 minutes, but it's so good.
You're just like, this guy, he can do no wrong.
He just knows what he wants, and I think that's what is like a marker of a good writer, director, writer, whatever you are, is if you know what you want, you're more than likely going to do it well.
Yeah. So, let's jump in. Let's start talking about the movie. Like, the movie's a little bit more in depth. So, In Bruges.
Yeah.
So, I think we already got to the point where The movie's funny. The movie's good. Um, and now, what's the movie about?
Well, so Colin Farrell plays Ray, who's this. He was assigned to his first job as a hitman in London, which obviously, as a flashback will show, did not go well.
Yeah, that got out of hand very quickly.
Yeah, was supposed to kill a priest, and in the process, shot a child in the head.
Completely
So
on
that's kind
accident,
of
and he is destroyed about it.
yeah. So Brendan Gleeson's character Ken is his partner and kind of whisks him away from the moment, and they are sent to Bruges, Belgium, to hide out in the aftermath of this until their boss, played by Ralph Fiennes, brilliantly played by Ralph
Their
Fiennes.
boss Voldemort tells Mad Eye Mooney and the guy from Fantastic Beasts to hide out in medieval Europe.
Right.
There's a lot of
Uh,
Harry Potter people in this movie, by the way. Letting you know.
hey, English filmmaking is a small market, but they all know each other, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah, so they're sent to Bruges to kind of hide out, and Ray hates it, whereas Ken likes it a lot more because of its historic uh, landmarks, and that kind of is becomes the mode of the movie for the first half. Is that it's kind of about the location and discovering the characters and learning the situation, and then the second half becomes this mad dash to the end that is, uh, I just love it so
That
much.
ending was fantastic.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh
I
yeah.
will say in comparing the two, like if I had to compare like the two endings of these movies, In Bruges' ending is like chef's kiss, man. Just it's perfect.
Yeah. And that's why I love this movie so much. Is it really is to the nth degree a well-oiled machine.
Mm.
Every bit of it is set up and payoff and has a purpose. And McDonough uses every aspect of the movie to its fullest degree. Um, and especially because, particularly, what I thought about when watching this movie this time around, which is probably the third or fourth time I've seen it,
Hmm.
um, is that he doesn't pay too much attention to the cinematography, and I kind of like that. I like that he lets the writing and the characters do a little bit more,
Mm.
because the cinematography, while good, is fairly basic. Um, you know, you have this town, and there's plenty of good B-roll, uh, but even still, like the cutting and the framing is fairly simplistic, and a lot of the bokeh in it probably helps to soften up the backgrounds of shots and
Yeah,
you know.
it feels like the a lot of the technical stuff in the film is very much more function over flash. He's
Yeah.
not trying to do what a lot of I guess new directors nowadays try to do, where blow your mind with these very intricate, detailed shots that probably took hours to set up,
Yeah.
or there's the composition looks like it's so finely done. It looks like somebody painted it onto the frame. It's so good.
Yeah.
He's over here being like, no, no, no. This is about these guys. It's about what happened to them. They're talking, and that's good enough. You're gonna get all the story. You're gonna get the character. You're gonna get laughs, drama, all out of this, and I don't have to be that flashy with it. I mean, the
Yeah.
flashiest scene is the scene where Ken has to go and um, kill Ray, and that's just because it has that low tracking shot. It has this culmination of this big climactic moment, and it just kind of and it just ends, and you laugh, and you're like, my God.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think that comes as an extension of McDonough's experience as a playwright, certainly,
Mm.
and his experience shows. It's interesting you point that out too, because he himself points out how whenever he writes these things, even in Three Billboards, he uses comedy as kind of like the pressure valve release,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of a common tip for a lot of writers who would get into black comedy.
Mm-hmm.
They'll often say that the comedy is always supposed to be the comic relief, the common term. But
Yeah.
I love the way that McDonough uses it in such a particular way as to get us to look at these super dark events and themes, and still come out of them being like, wow, why are we doing all this?
You're just like, this got really dark all of a sudden. What? No.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
but
kind of like
okay, that's
this.
still funny.
Yeah, it's the stripping away of vanity of any situation, because like that scene in particular is a super dark moment for one character, a super dark moment for another character, and when they clash, it becomes like this like sheepish kind of betrayal of best friends. Like one of them saw the other one nude or something.
It almost turns into like a Laurel and Hardy sketch out of
Yeah.
nowhere where they just start where they're just like so confused as to what to do next, and they're just like, well, we both kind of want the same thing, but we really don't want to go through with it, and it's really like, I don't, you want to get a beer or something?
Yeah, and I don't know. I think it's that combined with the moments like um, one of my favorites, and one of probably everybody who sees this movie's favorite, is the coffee shop scene right before the climax,
Oh,
where Harry and Ken are sitting outside having a beer at night, and Ken just kind of tells him, it's like, dude, you suck, or as the line dictates, even your kids suck.
yeah, you're all a bunch of you're all a bunch of bastards. You're a terrible human being. But I mean, like
Yeah,
that's just who you are, you know. I don't really care. And then
which is kind of like this other side of McDonough I really like, is that his dialogue is so blunt all of the time.
Mhm.
Well, he's good at crafting words, certainly, and I think he could get into subtext, and I think he does with the whole um, kind of religious analyzation that happens throughout this movie,
Mhm.
with their visits to museums and churches and such. He still remains like this. It goes almost like beyond on the nose, which would be against the rules of writing, so to speak,
Yeah.
and then just get straight into like, it's so brutally honest that it's like you can't avoid it. Um, which I think he kind of doubles back with the visuals of like, boy, does McDonough love its violence.
Oh yeah. There's a lot more blood and punching in this movie than you would think there would be, but it is all great.
Yeah, it's like it's there's more blood in this movie than some horror movies at times.
Yeah.
Like, and I would even say that one of the visuals in this movie is almost harder to look at than some horror movies. Like, you know how I feel about that particular moment in Reanimator.
Yes.
That's almost how I feel about when Ken,
Has to take his leap of faith on that one.
yeah, so to speak.
Oh, that
Uh,
was hard to watch. I ain't even memeing, and I'm desensitized as hell at this point in my life. But I felt so bad.
yeah, but that's kind of why, that's one thing I really enjoy when a director can do it. Um, to get you to kind of, they stick your nose in the piss spot of, yeah, you thought you liked this kind of stuff. Uh, and I name dropped them earlier, but the Safdie brothers are really good at that too. And yeah, that moment too is so like violent, dark, but all you can think about is like, wow, that is such an act of love for another person when you really dig down to it.
And then then the culmination, you know, Ray pulls out the gun and it's broken, and you're just like all that showing of love, and it's like that's what you get out of it. And you're like, that's so sad. It's so sad.
But the villain gets his comeuppance.
He gets his
The villain gets
comeuppance.
in such a fucked up way.
He's a man of principle, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Oh, I see.
so that's kind of what goes on in the movie. So one of the things I was watching the film about, and I think a theme kind of came up, and it was a little bit of guilt, redemption, and kind of the implausibility of it all. Also, I feel like the movie's trying to make a play that Bruges is a kind of purgatory
I
for
would
Ray.
definitely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all like a purgatory for Ray and Ken and all this stuff because they're hitmen and all that stuff, but as we watch them, we see them interact, and they're generally okay people. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, Ray is a cokehead who just beats up tourists because, for reason, hashtag YOLO, and Ken, all we see, he's more experienced, he's killed a lot more people, but he is just, like, a really nice, like, cool guy. He seems like everybody's, like, really fun uncle.
Yeah.
And,
I really, like, I agree definitely with the purgatory thing. That was the one thing I noticed when I initially watched the movie, first time around, is one of my favorite scenes is that scene when they're in the museum looking at the painting. I didn't do the due diligence to actually learn what the name of the painting is, but it's one of these medieval
like trifold
paintings.
painting things.
Yeah, and it has like the images of heaven and hell and then purgatory in between. And I think that the movie kind of points out on the nose, it's like, yeah, that's what we're going for here. And I think McDonough has then stated that that's what he was going for. Because in Bruges, it came to mind to him when he actually took a day trip to Bruges way back in like 95.
Yeah.
And he, well, very much so experienced the sort of beautiful city. And I went to some of the museums and everything. And then after like the second day, I was just so bored out of my goddamn mind. All I wanted to do was like get drunk and get laid, and I think that's the paraphrase of what he said.
He goes from Ken to Ray in like the span of a day.
Yeah, and that's I guess where the idea of the movie originally came from, and then as a result, he kind of operates in these kind of crime films that have to do with these really moral themes, because that's kind of what playwrights are a little bit more adept at doing, more stories based on morale and those
I mean,
types
it's
of
called
things.
a morality play for a reason.
Right. Especially because that one of the plays that I think you would like, it's a trilogy, but the first play of the trilogy is about a priest comes to like settle an argument and problem between two brothers after one brother shoots their dad in the head.
Oh.
So one of the brothers is seeking forgiveness while the other one is trying to get him condemned to death, I think, something like this. Uh, and they're always about like these kinds of like kind of these questions of like morality of death is probably a little bit too simplistic, but kind of like seeking justice for death, whether it be from mortal figures or from otherworldly figures.
I guess. Okay. I mean, it's kind of interesting, and I think that's a really good good analysis of these two movies, because they're both about kind of like guilt and anger, depression, and how people deal with them. Where in Bruges we have the whole thing of these guys are in this purgatory and they're literally waiting on the call to see where they're gonna go. That's the whole first half of the movie is Ken and Ray, are they waiting on the call? Are they gonna get out? Are they gonna stay here? And then we find out that Ray's condemned to death and Ken has to be the one to do it. And then as the movie progresses, the Grim Reaper himself shows up in Henry and he attempts to kill both of them. And then Ray, we're not sure if he dies at the end. And it's one of those things where I think that's the perfect way to end it, where because at that point he wants to just be redeemed. He's gonna go find the mother of the kid he killed. He's gonna say, "Hey, I did this, and you get to decide what happens to me. Like if you say if you say I die, I'll shoot myself in the head right now. If you say I go to prison, I'll turn myself in." He just wants that redemption, and that's it, and it's kind of interesting. It's a whole like Catholic guilt play, right? I sinned, but I must repent so I can get into heaven.
There's that Irish.
That's that Irish Catholic guilt in them. In fucking Bruges.
Yeah, I think what I enjoy so much about that ending too is that kind of from the midpoint of the movie up until that final scene, you really kind of forget the whole purgatory thing.
Yeah.
It starts to become a little bit more about the physical conflict and like the crime bosses coming to make an example out of these two men who are in his ranks, and he's like, well, it's about principle. If we don't stop the buck here, then where do we stop it? Which is lovely. I always love when people do this with crime films, and they kind of make fun of the whole, well, how can you have honor when you technically are about having no honor?
Well,
Yeah, and so it's like, but yeah, up until that ending where the scene just gets totally like, it starts snowing and all of like the images get much more abstract and like kind of pillowy and cloudy, and
it gets a lot more fantastic. It turns into the fairy tale world that Harry was always talking about.
a little bit, yeah, because the movie they're shooting too, which I know somewhere there was a reason that McDonough wrote that in, that they were shooting a movie, and obviously becomes partially a plot device because, well, the little person becomes quite literally the ironic ending.
Yeah.
um,
Also, he has a thing with dwarves. It's real.
oh, he does. Yeah, I wanted to make note of that. Uh, which is fine, jobs, like
Sure.
But yeah, it's like you really forgot about that whole thing and up until that last scene, and then when the voiceover comes in, you just kind of are like, wow, this feels like he's in not the world.
Yeah, like it gives us context to that voiceover, and now we kind of understand it's like also that pleading at the end where I really don't want to die. I really, really don't want to die. And it's like that's kind of like haunting and funny at the same time, knowing like
Yeah,
Ray and how he talks and how that character is. And it's like and knowing what he wants to do if he lives, and it's so like you want him to live so he can basically go and die the right way, but then it's like, well, he's also a bad guy. Like we can be honest, like Ray is not a good person.
sure, but it's like kind of who is. You have practically everybody in this film, aside from the hotel manager, is a bad person
Yeah.
when you really boil it down to things.
Yeah.
The little person actor, the woman that he meets on set, who was in Tenet, by the way.
Oh.
She plays the lab person that explains the over the top exposition that everybody has a problem with now.
She is Christopher Nolan's exposition machine. He has one
Yeah,
per movie. See if you can
exactly.
find it.
It's pretty obvious in every single one. It's kind of like the temple of the movie, some might say. But like aside from that hotel manager, yeah, like not a single person in this movie is not guilty of something.
Yeah.
But then there's becomes like this specific. He has done the worst thing of all, apparently,
Mm-hmm.
and then it becomes like this. All the other characters, and this is another kind of more theatrical thing that I enjoy a lot about a lot of playwrights who move to the screen. They often do better at giving the side characters good story arcs, because Ken has this good story arc in being like, well, I should do my job and I should stand up for the morale and kill Ray, but it wasn't his fault. I feel a connection to Ray. It's like I don't want to kill him,
Mm-hmm.
but then where does that leave me morally? But can he redeem himself? And or even kind of Harry goes through this thing where it's like, I got to stick to my principles. I got to stick to my principles. And then when faced with that, he's like, well,
It's
I'm a man of principle.
somebody called him on his bluff,
Yeah.
and he went in.
Yeah. And I think that is another layer to this that makes it. I think one of the things I really love about McDonough overall is that none of the movies are rewatchable for like twist sake,
Mhm.
like a lot of movies. Like this is why a lot of people come back to M. Night Shyamalan, is they're like the twist. It's like it makes you go back and watch the movie a second time in a different light. Hitchcock too is known for this. I mean, you would go back and watch something like
I think Vertigo would probably
Psycho
be
for this.
oh yeah, Psycho's a good one. Vertigo's a good one.
Yeah, but McDonough is just like, no, there's no twist. This is all, you know where it's going, and then you go back and watch it again because it's like the emotion draws you in again and again and again.
It's one of those things where somebody could tell you the ending of this movie, which we really should start putting spoiler warnings on these episodes, but whatever.
This one I'll say no because it's like 12 years old. You should
Yeah.
have seen this movie.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. If a movie's over 10 years old, spoiler warnings are out the window.
And technically, any audience who's listening, you should have been watching the movies with us. So this is not our fault.
Yeah, sure. But that's kind of a thing where oh man, now I lost my train of thought, you bastard. It's
Sorry,
gone.
you were saying about the ending of the movie.
Yeah. So the ending of the movie, it's just knowing the ending of the movie and then rewatching it again. Somebody could tell you the ending, and I don't think that would influence how you would feel about these characters or get drawn into the story at all. Like, you could probably watch the end scene, come back like the next day, and then watch the rest of the movie and still get drawn in, even knowing how it goes, because you're kind of right. Like in Bruges, you kind of know where it's going more or less. These guys, something bad's gonna happen. This big clash of personalities is gonna come up sooner or later. We already know Harry's a kind of a very angry, violent person. Ken is the dutiful soldier, and Ray is the young, kind of screw up. Those three personalities, and they're going to culminate at some point. It's going to be an incredibly violent thing because, boys, we're in a crime movie. That's just kind of how this works.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's interesting. I really think this movie plays well on a lot of levels.
Yeah. I love this movie so much. I'm glad we got to cover it. But I think it's time to move on to the next movie of the pair, one which I also hold very near and dear to my heart. 3 Billboards in Ebbing, Missouri, or outside Ebbing, Missouri.
Yeah, and I'm gonna feel real bad because I'm gonna start asking some really weird questions, because this movie, I have some weird questions about this movie.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we will get to the last half of the last episode of the Double Feature podcast, because after this, I will never forgive Dean.
I swear to God, it won't be bad. I'm not gonna bitch at it like I did about Twilight on my other podcast. It's gonna be fine.
Fair enough.
All right,
we'll get to that right after
this.
Dean, I found a great way for us to do something cool and to make a little money on the side.
Great. I've been looking for a new place to put my money. What do you got?
No investment needed. In fact, it's super easy, and there's creation tools we can use to record our podcast right from the phone or computer.
Wait, why would you record a podcast on your phone? You want? Never mind. Where do I put my money for this?
I don't need any of your money. We can even get our podcast distributed to big streaming platforms like Spotify and Google Podcasts.
Oh, I get it now. We're talking big business here, okay? So you're going to need a lot of money from me. How much money are we talking here?
No, definitely don't need any of your money. In fact, we can make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership.
Okay. Now I think I'm getting what you're going at here. We need to spend money to make money. So we're talking some big gains here. Big gains.
No, definitely no. I don't need any of your money. Just all we need to make a podcast right in one place.
Okay. So what you're telling me is that you're going to need a pretty big check from me for this podcast. So do I just make it out to cash? Because it's no problem for me. I'll just write it up right now.
No, listen, Dean, just head over to anchor.fm and check it out. You'll see why Anchor is the best place for us to record, edit, and distribute our podcasts. And I definitely do not need any of your money.
Shut up and take my money. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Feature Podcast second half, talking about 3 Billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri. David, woo! What the fuck is this movie? What's going on? What's it about? What are the themes? Let's get into it.
Well, this movie is McDonagh's most recent release. It is about our main character, Mildred Hayes, a mother of 2 children, of divorced mother that is, now 1 child, though, as her daughter was quite brutally raped and then murdered. And then the town police have been lagging on the investigation in her eyes, so she seeks to erect some advertisements on these 3 billboards that are near her home to accuse the police of not doing their job. And the rest of the movie is the aftermath of this very controversial event.
Yes, where we get to see a beloved police chief commit suicide, a mentally impaired, kind of racist police officer get fired, then lit on fire, and then attempt to solve the crime, and then the whole town kind of rallying against Mildred for kind of uplifting the town's status quo. Kind of, sort of.
I don't know if the town is uplifted. I mean,
the town's definitely angry at her. They're
Yeah.
vehemently against her.
And I think to start the conversation, this is one of the things that I most enjoy about this movie, is while, you know, America has a problem right now. I don't know if you noticed. But
Yeah.
a lot of different parts of the country don't really agree with each other.
Yeah, that's
Right?
gonna be that's a big theme about America. We're very, very big, and you can go from coast to coast, and everyone in between has a different opinion on about everything.
And it's kind of the 21st century problem that I think America is going to face, is how does it come together as a whole? Because this problem didn't so much exist in the 20th century, right? Like, the country was still a little bit more gelled together. You could kind of travel around the whole country, and everybody was still
Basically the same kind of vibe. But
yeah.
that was a whole deal because like there wasn't an internet, there wasn't these giant like echo chambers of news and media and all that stuff that riled up. This isn't a political podcast. I'm gonna stop myself right there before I go on my rabbit
Certainly,
hole.
yeah. Well, I'm sure any listener to the podcast is not unaware of what's going on, and that's not what we're trying to draw attention to so much as what I like so much about this movie in that a foreigner,
Mm-hmm.
particularly an English foreigner, but then also a foreigner in general, tried to make this like really raw, honest view of what America looks like. Uh, is that it doesn't have a lot of the biases of somebody who lives in America. It's just from the outside. I came to the U.S. and this is what I observed,
Mm-hmm.
and none of it is based in this sort of, well, I'm actually part of this demographic or part of this demographic, like so many people have right now. I think sometimes that our lenses of our own lives get in the way of how we view the whole, and McDonough thankfully didn't have that going into this.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because this does feel like a view of an American town from an outside perspective, because we hit all the tent poles of certain very poor aspects of American culture. Uh, you know, racism, very poor police officering, kind of very bass backwards life in rural communities that some view
Yeah.
as very behind the times. It's a very, I don't know if it's a cynical view of America, but it is a very interesting view of America.
Yeah, I don't think it's totally cynical. There's kind of a, and one reason I think this does pair well within Bruges is McDonough does another good job at like taking the location that the story is in
Mm-hmm.
and making it this sort of romantic analyzation through the lens of the story.
Mm-hmm.
In Bruges we get that through the analyzing the churches and the history and kind of making this, as we said, this kind of purgatory that the story takes place in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a level to that in this as well. While quite not at the level of purgatory, there's sort of like this. There's an idea that we all live in that Main Street USA, for years was what people saw America as.
Yeah.
And that's largely what I think you would say this movie is about, is Main Street America. But
It's
I
kind
think
of like what's left over of Main Street America. It's not Main Street America of like your grandparents. It's like Main Street America in the 21st century after the gloss and like the shine is kind of worn off, and we're just kind of left with all the old shop windows and empty buildings.
Yeah, and I think there's a romanticism to that shows some of the beauty of it that also acknowledges its faults. So I think it's a quite fair view of how some might see like I said before, kind of this Dust Bowl or maybe a Midwestern, an Appalachian, if you will, because it was actually done in North Carolina where Appalachia is, but you know.
I know the Appalachians. I got my I'm pretty sure like great grandparents are from the Appalachians.
Yeah.
Say Yander gonna
we
go
all,
down, get washed down the creek.
All of America was at some point. I mean, that's where 13 colonies were.
Well, that's true. If your family has been in America long enough, somebody in your family tree probably lived in the Appalachians.
Not me. Oops.
Not you? No.
No, none of my. I'm a bunch of those Irish immigrants that came over in the industrial area. So.
Damn it. My mom's family came over into the rural area. My dad's went to Chicago. But besides the point, little family history. So yeah, 3 Billboards. So we kind of know how the movie plays out. I guess this is where we'll give the spoiler warning because we're gonna get kind of deep about it.
Yeah, I mean the movie's was a huge tentpole movie for Oscar season when it came out. It's about 3-4 years old now.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it was one of the movies that everyone thought was gonna win that year. Because what was it against? It was against this lady in. Was it Lady in or The Shape of Water? Was it Shape of Water that was against that year?
I think so. Let's see. 90th Academy Awards. Let's take a look. You don't often get to look at
awards season.
I think the last time we looked at a bunch of awards was like when we did Mr. Smith Goes to Washington,
which we found out was in a banger of a year.
Yeah. So let's see here.
Because we just need the best picture.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So the best picture nominees for that year, I don't think it got, or it did get a nomination. The others that were in there were The Shape of Water, which did win.
Yes.
Then there was Call Me by Your Name, which I believe that was the
David
movie about
it
Timothy Chalamet. That's who it was.
Yeah, yeah. It was the one that won a lot. It was the one that won a lot of festival awards, right? That was the big festival winner that year.
Yeah. Darkest Hour, which that was the Winston Churchill
World War II political drama. You got to get one in every Oscar.
There's actually one of my favorite lines from that movie, which is, "How can you reason with the lion when your head is in its mouth?" That's one of my favorite lines.
I can dig it.
Then Dunkirk and Get Out, 2 movies nobody saw.
Oh yeah, who saw those?
Which, if I'm gonna be honest, Dunkirk should have won that.
I was in the opposite opinion because I saw Get Out and I loved that movie. I thought that movie was fantastic.
That's fair.
Yeah, but that was one of those things where I saw Get Out and I super enjoyed it, and then 3 years later I'm in a cinema class. It's race and cinema, and they make me watch that as our final film, and I'm like, oh, thank God. A movie that's not gonna make me feel bad for 2 hours. Badass.
Yeah. Then let's see, Lady Bird, which I love that movie as well. And then a couple of Phantom Thread and The Post, which are like,
Yeah.
But I believe so. It did win 2 Oscars.
Yeah, I believe those were the Best Actor Oscars it won.
Best Actress, Frances McDormand, which returned to the podcast, and what a return! I mean,
yeah. Did we give her Worst Actress?
We did, and I think this is finally the point where I say, I knew you were there all along. Don't worry.
Yeah,
I would advocate
the separation of those performances is like also 20-something years. So
yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. And that's also to say that She went on to have plenty of other great performances. Frances McDormand, one of my favorite actresses, and it's just that Darkman is such a.
You just hate Darkman. That movie is great. You can't still
Agree
be
to
salty
disagree
about it.
still.
It's come on, dude. That was 2020.
Yeah, yeah. Well, then it's in the past, Dean. Um, so aside from that, there was Best Supporting Actor for Sam Rockwell. They did get the win there, which I also believe was the best decision.
But yeah, so this movie, it was, one was nominated for Best Picture, won some Oscars, and from my recollection, this was the movie that a lot of people thought was gonna win. It was like this, Call Me by Your Name, and I don't even remember if Shape of Water was actually in the conversation to win that year.
Yeah, nobody thought that was going to win because if I remember correctly, everybody was like, "You mean the movie where the girl fucks the fish?"
I
No.
remember those memes. I remember those memes.
Yeah.
But yeah, like because I know, and people were also rallying for Get Out to win because that was the indie hit that basically blew everybody's mind when it came out.
Yeah, which that one did. It did get the a best original screenplay, which is probably enough vindication for
Jordan Peele. Yeah.
Jordan Peele. He was working on that thing forever.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's that. So let's kind of get back into the movie proper. But
Yeah.
I remember because that's kind of what I was saying. This movie feels like tonally different than in Bruges because it feels like it was designed to go into an award season. You have you have well-known actors turning in great performances. You have a story that's dealing with very particular issues in like the American culture, and you're exploring a very raw emotional some very raw and emotional themes, and I don't know if it I don't know if that ending is exactly the kind of ending you would want for an Oscar win because it makes you think, or if it's the kind of ending you get to when you write yourself into a corner and you don't want to add
So
another hour to the movie.
yeah, I guess do you want to start by talking about the ending? Because I do have some notes on that.
A
But
little bit. Let's okay, let's just catch everybody up so they know what the ending how we get to the ending, and then we'll just jump right into it. But
that's
let's
fair.
catch up a little bit. So Mildred,
Hmm.
she puts up a bunch of billboards. They're accusing the police force of being basically incompetent because they can't find her daughter's killer. The police chief tells her, it's like, hey, we have no evidence, we have no witnesses, we've been at it, we've been trying for like 7 months, we have no leads. Like, the guy who did it is probably a drifter, we have no idea where he went, and we have no idea what he looks like. And then the police chief commits suicide because he also has terminal cancer. And then Dixon, who is the racist, dumb guy who let's be honest, like, there's no way Jason Dixon becomes a police officer except in a town with a population of like 40 people.
I beg to differ.
I'm just
So
saying that. I'm not even saying because he's like a racist or whatever. I'm saying because his IQ is in like the single digits. This guy is
well,
dense.
yeah. So I think there's some obvious exaggeration to that character, but I would venture to say that it's not impossible for a guy like that to, and I think that's what McDonough's trying to say is that in America these kinds of things can still happen because it's not like there's safeguards against this. I mean, like they explicitly state in the movie, he spent 6 years, one of which he was held back in the police academy, which is totally possible. I have a and I don't want to disparage any family members, nor will I think they will ever find this. But um, I have a family member who also kind of struggled in police academy for years, and then also became a cop, and is a politically charged person, as we'll say.
Okay, but
But
are they as dense as Dixon?
no, I mean I'm not going to go and say that, but like,
Because, like, don't get me wrong, like, I get it. bad people get through the police academy and just get pushed through. I understand that. Totally get it. But my God, Dixon looks like he eats crayons.
Yeah,
I don't think he would legally be allowed to drive a car.
but I think that's the point. Is like there's it, and I think that this is actually one of my favorite criticisms that McDonough makes is that America kind of has this like just because we can, we should problem where it's like we love our freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody in this country makes that apparent. But I certainly think that we're coming to reckon with the idea that, we have freedom. Does that mean we use it in the most responsible way? No.
Probably not.
and
Probably not.
and I think that's what Dixon kind of encapsulates is this idea of an American who is this foghorn leghorn country bumpkin, my mama doesn't, he's that guy who's very more idealistic about life, like some Americans are.
He is the caricature of he's a far extreme caricature of a American country bumpkin police officer.
Yeah,
Granted, like again, this is a movie, and sometimes you just need like caricatures to do that. And then, granted, Dixon he has a redemption arc, quote unquote, where Mildred, after her billboards get burned down basically because people are being, are very much against her and all that other things, and she goes and burns down the police station, which totally rational and adult thing to do is burn down a police station. Totally. And she throws the Molotov cocktails in there and doesn't realize that somebody's in the building and lights Dixon on fire. And Dixon,
yes, you do.
in his act of selfish defiance to all this, he goes out of his way to save the case file to Mildred's daughter's murder. And then he tries to go out and he's trying to kind of solve the case, and he's trying to redeem himself because he realizes that the hate he holds in his life is not good for him, obviously. Which is weird, and a lot of people had issue with Dixon's portrayal in the film because it was, man, you're making the racist cop have a redemption arc when really that guy is a terrible human being.
Yeah, and that's actually interesting because I would say that's one of my favorite parts of the film. Because I think that's one thing that America, despite itself, needs to kind of get a hold of. Is so, and again, we're not a totally political podcast, but I don't think it's I don't think it takes a brainiac to figure out, in order for the country to become whole again, we're going to have to find a way to forgive each other and move on. And I think that's what this arc is about, is showing that even when a character is plagued by things as racism, as anger, as violence, as alcoholism,
as pure, unadulterated stupidity.
Yeah. These people, all they want to do at the end of the day, and this is the most American thing, is they just want to survive. Every movie about America in recent memory I could think of is really highlighting the beast that it is and how people are just trying to survive it.
Mm-hmm.
And even in small town America, all you want to do is have your job, your home, and your beer at the end of the day. And that's who he is. It's just that then it becomes, okay, but does that mean I'm leading a good life overall? Can I be more than that by leading a life that is held in compassion for my neighbor?
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I don't. It's the stereotypical. It's the good Christian thing to do. To quote a very southern, drawly, ideology. It's, well, yeah, you're having your beer at the end of the day, but you're kind of rude to that store clerk, and that's just not good Christian. Just be good. It's a thing where it's not like religious, at least in the sense that I've been told it by some family members. It's just, you just be a good person. And that's the kind of the ending culmination of Dixon's thing is I don't even think he learns to just he learns to let go of all that hatred and just kind of just I don't know if he becomes a good person at the end, because this is where we get to the end. So at the end of the movie, basically Dixon finds this guy and he's positive he's good for the murder, but finds out he's not. But he's sure he's a rapist. He's just not the right rapist. And he tells Mildred this, and Mildred is like, well, what are we going to do? And then they decide to go off to Ohio where the guy lives, and they're going to murder this guy.
Idaho.
Or in Idaho. Same. Okay. Goes off to Idaho, and they're going to murder this guy. And they're driving off, and they're like, so are you sure about this? And the other one's like, no. So what are we going to do when they get there? Honestly, I don't even know if we're going to get there. I guess we'll decide on the way. And then it just cuts to black. Now, that's the thing where Dixon, it's like the whole arc where he goes from being, bad racist dude, and he then goes into being this beaten down, like he's lost everything, and then he kind of just like finds compassion after that. But then he's still going to go and basically be an accomplice to murder. Granted, we're not even sure he actually does it, and that's another thing. So these characters, do you think these characters are going to go up to Idaho and murder some guy?
So that's kind of the interesting thing. I love the ending to this movie. I think that movies are best left ended when they can be interpreted. Kind of like in Bruges.
Yes.
It's kind of an interpretive ending. You don't know whether Ray lives or dies. What's most important is that you don't want him to die and that he doesn't want to die. Because that's kind of the point of the movie, is that none of us want these things that happen to us. And when we realize that, we kind of get lost in this machine of life, and we kind of realize along the way that what we've done is a terrible thing, and we start to feel grief for it, or shame, or sinful, or whatever word you want to slap on it. I think that's kind of the same process that McDonagh ends on here. The characters know they want justice still. That's what both of them have wanted from the beginning. Whether that was in the form of like an ideological justice, like Dixon, who was just trying to be the cop of the town.
Yeah.
And so he was just the badge and gun. But he's kind of transcended that to become somebody who is an actual agent of justice. Outside of his... He no longer wants to receive recognition for it. He just wants to receive forgiveness and compassion from his neighbor for helping them seek out justice.
Yeah.
Which is kind of in that letter that Willoughby leaves him the key to it. And Mildred, opposite of that, there's that moment right before they leave on the swing set where she says that she was given hope, even just for a day, that there would be justice. That, I think, is what they're ultimately left with, is by the time we get there, do we feel like we still need to do the act? Well, what are they committing the act for? And you can get into kind of the specifics of it, but I think most of all what I like most about the ending and what I think is most important to take away is that both the characters are given this hope that they can ride on, that they know, while morbid and technically unlawful, and some might even say is still sinful, at the end of the day is giving justice to those who have been wronged.
Okay.
And that, I think, is the most American thing about the movie. The thing that we should all think is the most American thing anyway. Because you make this kind of interesting point about the religion in all of this. And I like that McDonagh denounced it from the beginning in that scene with the priest.
Yeah.
Because you could analyze this through kind of the American Christian way. It would end up being a totally different movie.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, yes. Okay, because there's a thing going on in this movie, and one of the themes going on here is rage, like anger, and where that kind of leads you. And that's the whole thing at the end of the movie with Willoughby's letters where, or rage only begets rage, which is what the girlfriend says. Um, and it's
I read it
huh?
in a book
Well, I read it on a
that I was
bookmark
reading.
in a
Yeah.
book, but yeah,
Uh,
and it's one of those things where okay, she was probably the only funny part about this movie. I ain't gonna lie, but
I don't think. Oh, well, what? You don't like Peter Dinklage's character either?
Peter Dinklage is giving a performance that is like that should have been nominated for an Oscar. No memes.
Because I love every character that shows up in this movie. I think it's another example of how McDonagh's a master at characters.
Well, I think the characters are good. It's just they're all so. Okay. I'll get to my point about the real quick about the rage thing, and then that's gonna lead into Mildred's because
Sure, yeah.
she's got
'Cause
issues.
I do have a note about this too,
Yeah.
and I think it's an important point.
Yeah, because a lot of this movie is about like rage and what like people who have been wronged and the anger that they hold and the things that they do and how people react in the aftermath of just this unadulterated anger. Because Mildred, she feels wronged by the police officers because they're not doing their job, and she's angry and she lashes out in the town. She wrecks these billboards. She calls them out, and the town, and then Willoughby dies, and then the town thinks that he did it because of the billboards because a lot of them don't know about the cancer. Even Dixon thinks he does that, and the rage lashes out, and they're angry at each other, and everybody's at each other's throats, and it only changes when Dixon goes from having that being a man of anger to a man of compassion. And then Mildred kind of takes that where he was compassionate enough to go out. He tried something. It was unsuccessful. He made a wrong call, but he tried something. And Mildred took that piece of compassion and said, that gave me hope. For a second, I wasn't angry. I was hopeful. And that showed me something else in this. And that's I feel is a big theme of the movie is that anger and that rage. And then that brings me to Mildred because Mildred is a terrible person.
Ah, come on.
Terrible person. Bro, are you
I don't
kidding me?
think so.
If you were having dinner and your mom threw Rice Krispie treats in your hair and expected you to laugh at that, would you be like, that's so
Well,
cute, mom? No. For God's
well,
sake.
it's like I kind of think it's just kind of an experiential thing.
Or when
It's
she
a thing,
yells at her daughter, I hope you get raped on the way too.
but I think that's the kind of thing that shows up because this is kind of an interesting point, and that might kind of show the difference in point of view on this.
Mhm.
Because your parents have been married since forever, pretty much.
Uh,
Good marriage going on.
they've been oh God, have they been married? They've been married over 30 years now, so probably they've been married 36 years, maybe. They might be getting
And you
40
would say
soon.
overall like happy family, right?
I mean, yeah, we're working class Irish family, it's
And
what
I think
happens.
this is kind of the difference because like Mildred reminds me a lot of my mom.
Mm.
Uh, I, being that I come from the divorced family, so I kind of get this a little bit more. How family can kind of get angry at each other without meaning it. Because that's what happens in these family dynamics is you start to harbor rage at each other, kind of like you're saying, you harbor rage and shoot from the hip, even though you don't really mean it. It just it's rooted this kind of underlying thing that is connected to the larger story of the family, but that otherwise in a healthy family would never show up because that's not like the health of the family is good.
Yeah.
Whereas the health of this family, especially in that of the father in this family, who's the real fucking asshole in the movie,
The dad
the worst.
is an asshole. I can see that. He's a really deplorable person, but
Yeah,
granted,
and I think
you
that's
know,
I think that it ends up becoming why I think Mildred she deserves her sympathy because that's who the guy that guy did something to her, and then the kids as a result that the kids then also took out on her. And that's kind of the dynamic of these divorced families is that there's often this kind of posturing of stories. Whose side are you on? Who's the good or bad guy? What's the truth in all of who's good and bad? And as a result, it can result, and that's where the rage comes from.
yeah.
Is this Game of Thrones that happens in family, so to speak. And Mildred being a tough person on the outside is just kind of like the physical manifestation of what she had to do to protect her family. She had to become that tough.
So her assaulting two teenagers in a parking lot, that's cool.
They deserve that. They threw a can of soda at her car.
Her lighting the police station on fire and then lighting Dixon on fire, totally cool.
Not necessarily totally cool, because that then is also kind of an extension of the darker points of the movie.
Well, okay.
Um,
Here's the one, and this is the one I find the most undefensible, okay, of her actions. And you know what? Because everything up I've said to this point, I get it. She's a woman of rage, principle. She is angry at the world. She is not going to bow because society says she should. She is angry and she doesn't give a shit who does it. But when she goes out with Jim to the restaurant, played by Mr. Peter Dinklage, and Peter Dinklage is there and he's just trying to have a nice date. You know, he legitimately is interested in Mildred. He wants to have a good time, and she is like, you forced me on this date, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, forced you? I asked you because I asked you. This isn't even really a favor. He's like, I'm a dwarf, I'm a used car salesman, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm not a catch, but you ain't much one either. Like, you're the one who's ruining this. Like, I'm just trying to be a nice guy. Like, I helped you. I didn't have to come and hold a ladder for you in the fucking middle of nowhere. He's like, I took the time to be kind to you. And when the only thing you give me is bullshit. Go fuck yourself.
but, and this is, because I do think, yeah, she's kind of an ass in that moment.
She is in the wrong in that moment.
Yeah, I would say she's in the wrong, but that's kind of the thing about Peter Dinklage's character as well, who, if I'm going to name drop so that I don't have to keep saying Peter Dinklage.
I believe his name is James.
Yeah.
James, sorry.
James knows that. James knows that she's hurt, and I think he knows that from the get-go, because at the top of the scene, when the ex-husband is there and she's okay with it at first, he could see that it's kind of an awkward situation and that we might need to cut this short. Because she is going through a tough time right now. But it's only up until the moment that she forgets her own truth of, like, I can handle this, when she really knows, when at the end of the day, it's like she can't. I think that's when the scene turns, in that he still understands the whole, this woman is going through a tough time thing. But that, yeah, at the end of the day, what's going on right now, you don't have to be such a shit about. We can sympathize with each other for a moment if you weren't so inside of yourself.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel she gets so singularly focused that, granted, she's a great character. Like, this is a great performance. Like, the character is interesting and good and all this other stuff. I just think she's a terrible person. Which does, like, don't get me wrong. There are characters I love that are terrible human beings. Travis Bickle's a terrible human being, but I love Taxi Driver. It's just a thing where it's just like, in that moment, I'm like looking at her, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, fuck you. Like, he took you out to a nice seafood and steak restaurant. He showed up in a suit. You're wearing fucking coveralls. You obviously hate being around anyone. And you can't even make small talk for like 10 minutes for a guy who basically covered you from going to prison.
And I think that's kind of the nice resolution to the scene, is that when she goes and takes the wine bottle over to the table and is finally like, you know what? I think it's time to sow the seeds of forgiveness. And that's the first step to me forgiving the world for what has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that I need to just let you go because you have your own problems that you'll need to deal with on your own, and I can't focus on them. I can't let them continue to hurt me. And that's kind of like this. Becomes the end of one arc to the movie, but is kind of the beginning to why, again, I think the ending is more about the interpretation of it and what you would do rather than what the characters actually do. Because do I see them actually getting all the way to Idaho and killing the guy? No.
I don't think they even get out of town.
In the long run? Yeah, logically, it would become this... They would basically be throwing everything away in a way that goes against what most of the movie is. McDonough actually doesn't even say either whether they do. He's kind of up to this interpretive mode of it as well. And furthermore, is that I think that the two characters ultimately are going on a journey of kind of healing.
Hmm.
They're going to contemplate their anger together and as a pair with each other's company, and maybe find a little bit more solace in the world because of that.
Okay. Okay. I can get behind that.
It's kind of like, in a way, to tie it back to like some of the religious themes that are missing from the movie. Am I my brother's keeper? I think it's that biblical story wrapped up into a theme that I think a lot of people could do better knowing about and thinking about from a day-to-day basis.
So yeah. So there's a little bit of theme, a little bit of character study there. Yeah,
Yeah,
don't get me wrong. I
think
still think the movie's great. It's just, god damn, people in this movie are just so angry,
yeah, yeah.
and it's like,
there's no daisies in this movie.
well, okay, Chief Willoughby is. I think Chief Willoughby, Woody Harrelson's character, is a great person, good dad.
Sure.
He's a good dad. He has these like nuggets of like wisdom. He is legitimately trying to help Mildred. He's incapable of doing it because of circumstances outside of his control. And then when he kills himself, it's the beauty in the dialogue there and the beauty in the moment where his reasonings almost justify it. Where that then comes to a whole other thing of can people really justify suicide or whatever. And I'll spoil it to you. I'm not a fan of suicide in any sense. I don't think that's a good option in 99.9% of instances. But this scene makes a very good argument for it. And
Yeah,
I
I
feel for the
see it
character.
more. I've always seen this as more euthanasia rather than suicide. I don't think it's, well, yeah, on a book textbook definition, it's suicide. The man has a terminal disease, and he's just making a decision to die now rather than later. Kind of like what we saw in
In
a
Bruges.
necessary death.
Oh yeah, in a necessary death. Yeah.
It's that moral argument, but obviously that there's a particular point of view that McDonough takes within this character that I think does two things. First, it's that while Chief Willoughby is kind of seen as the antagonist to Mildred and an ally to Dixon, but is a little bit more of a guardian to both characters, thematically speaking, because he embodies that sort of patience, calm, and healing that they're supposed to get a hold of by the end of the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think McDonough makes an interesting observation in making the characters only learn that in the wake of tragedy. Because that's kind of what America is, if you think about it. I think we only grow as a country in the wake of tragedy, which is kind of a dark view of it, but it's kind of true if you think about it.
Yeah, yeah. We
I mean,
only know we can only grow after we have a major fuck up and can look at it in
not
retrospect.
necessarily fuck up, but like in any of the moments of this country that have seen a lot of progression, whether that be Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation, World War II, the Depression, um,
Vietnam,
9/11 in more
9/11.
recent memory,
Yeah.
have all been moments where we started to grow more as a country and become a little bit more, progressive isn't the right word because, again, there's kind of a political definition to that goes away from the dictionary definition, but like we progress as a country only once we experience these horrible things.
And we can look introspectively.
Yeah, and we have to like process them, which is a little sad. You'd think that as a country we should be able to maybe anticipate certain things that we need to look forward into the future for. But I think there's a truth to that in analyzing America that McDonough mirrors through this event.
But yeah, so that was three billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri.
Yeah, that was certainly it. And again, both of these movies, a couple of my favorites. I'm not going to have anything but good things to say. But overall, Dean, it's up to you this time.
This is
Because
true.
I'll go to the ends of the earth to say that these are two of my favorite movies. These are two of some of the best movies I've seen in a while. I think they're two of some of the best movies ever made. But to you and the pair specifically, what's some final thoughts and feelings about these?
Well, so I have a question because you brought up
Mhm.
when we were over break, you brought up the budget of three billboards. Could you
Oh
spoil
yes,
that
yes,
for me real
yes.
quick? Because I know the budget for In Bruges, and I'm curious about three billboards. The reason for this is because I'm curious of how much they came in with versus the result they came out with. Because that kind of sort of informs my opinion about the work involved. But I'm just curious.
We'll have the turntables. We're going to be doing the classic formula for this podcast. Dean used to tease the budget and then made me guess the box office, and I was terrible at it for the most part. And this time, I'm going to make you do the same thing.
Oh, son of a bitch.
So you've seen the budget for In Bruges, correct?
Yeah, it was like 15 million.
Correct.
Yes.
What do you think the box office was?
I mean, I did kind of spoil the box office for myself, but I actually can't remember if it was in the hundreds of grands and the hundreds of millions. So I'm feeling really bad right now. I think I want to say that the In Bruges was a flop, so I think it was only like 300 grand.
No, it made its money back.
Oh, damn it. Okay, I'm doing bad.
Distributed in both the United Kingdom and the United States. United Kingdom distribution by Universal Pictures, so it was probably marketed as a big ticket movie in London and other places. Focus Features got the distribution in the United States, so a little bit more indie. But overall, it made $34.5 million in
Oh,
box office.
okay. Yeah, that's
So
respectable.
not like a runaway success, but it three times the budget. You can expect the investors to be satisfied.
Yeah, that's definitely enough of a in terms of like a debut feature. That's enough to say, yeah, we can keep you on. We can keep making
Yeah,
movies with you.
that as well, because well, McDonough has not gone on to be like a huge name in filmmaking. He certainly carved out a career after that because he got his investment back,
Mhm.
and with Universal Pictures nonetheless,
Yeah.
who at the time in 2008, the other big name that they had going on from the UK was somebody named Edgar Wright.
If you heard of them, I don't know if he's still working today.
Yeah, another Universal Pictures director. But opposite of that, and on the other end of his career, uh, what do you think the budget for Ebbing, Missouri was?
Oh God. So I want to say like a lot of the budget had to go to the cast because the cast is solid.
Hmm.
Because we have Woody Harrelson, Frances McDormand, Sam Rockwell, Peter Dinklage. I think Peter Dinklage could probably demand a little bit of change because I think this is during like peak Game of Thrones. So I want to say this movie might have cost like I'd say 50 to 100 grand, but that's kind of a wide margin. So I'm gonna go up to the higher end of the spectrum. I'm gonna say somewhere in the 70 million.
Interesting.
I'm gonna say this movie cost a lot of money.
It did not.
It did not.
12 to 15 million is the quote.
What?
Now,
I
and
don't
this
even
is,
think
I
that would
think,
pay for the actors.
so this is actually the thing that was interesting in the interviews. A lot of the people who were in this movie were huge fans of Martin McDonough. Because again, he's had a storied career on the stage.
Mm.
So, and some of these actors have gone to act for him on the stage, so they know him. And apparently, Frances McDormand got this part because she had met him and gone to dinner with him once before, and then had met with him and said, "Write a part for me." So she was on board with him from the get go.
Okay.
And then a lot of actors, aside from this, Sam Rockwell was in Seven Psychopaths, so that was the connection there. And Martin McDonagh has said Sam Rockwell is one of the best actors acting today, and I agree with him. Sam Rockwell is one of my favorites.
I adore Sam Rockwell. Have you ever seen? He's in Moon, right?
Yeah, I
Moon,
haven't
Duncan
seen it.
Jones.
I want
You
to,
should watch it. That movie made me a fan of Sam Rockwell.
certainly. And technically, another return to the podcast. He was in Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, he was. That's also Galaxy Quest. Great movie.
Interesting.
Yes.
But then, yeah, I think other than that, Woody Harrelson was also a big fan of his. And can't forget, he was also in Seven Psychopaths. He plays the main antagonist in that movie. So, a couple returners. But it becomes the big question here. Box office estimation for this movie.
Box office. Okay, so this came out in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Nominated for Best Picture.
And won a couple of Academy
Won a
as
couple,
well as a Golden Globe Award.
Won a couple Golden Globe Awards.
And then also piles of BAFTA awards.
Yes, I'm looking here. It says it won 130 awards over its run. So I'm thinking, how much was the budget again? 15 million.
12 to 15
12 to
million
15
is what they say. I don't know why there's a range, but that's what we got.
So I gotta say okay. Then this movie probably made like $100 million. If it just ran in all the festivals, had a wide release, because it was distributed by Fox, right? Was Fox the
Fox Searchlight, yeah.
Fox Searchlight? Yeah, this movie had to have made like $100 million. Even if it was like had a couple of runs in like the theaters or something like that. I'm saying like somewhere around there, $100 million.
Pretty good. $160.2 million.
160, my God.
So by that metric, a smash success.
Okay.
Probably one of the biggest earners of that season, if anything.
Good picks.
Or that year, I guess, when you think about it.
Good run on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I guess that kind of brings me back to the thing of my analysis here, my ending thoughts. All right, now knowing how much they cost, how much they made, kind of understanding the critical response to this, and people's overall thoughts on the movies individually, how they pair together. Okay, I think it goes back to what I said in the beginning. In a vacuum, both these movies are great. You can watch either one of these movies and enjoy them. If you are in the mood to watch Martin McDonagh's work, these two are the best places to go. I would say that there's a tonal problem between them, but that doesn't make them bad movies. It just makes them a very odd double feature. I don't think they work well for a double feature. But I think if you're just in the mood to watch two very, very good movies by the same director, this is a really good place to go. Yeah. This is probably like the best place to go if you're looking for just two great movies. It's kind of the thing with the Coen Brothers episode that started off the month, where they're two amazing movies, but the two on opposite ends of the spectrum for the director. Whereas it's kind of the same thing. They're two amazing movies, but they might not be on two opposite ends of the spectrum, but they're two tonally different films. And it makes it kind of hard to run through them. Not that they're hard to watch by any definition. They're very easy to watch. They did not feel 2 hours, like at all. Like the cutting and the editing and the film work was great. But that's how I would say it. Very good movies. You should absolutely watch them. Marathoning them back to back might be a little rough.
I think that's a fair assessment, because I'm certainly going to be biased on the subject, and
you don't say.
I accept your assessment wholeheartedly. So, what a ride!
What a ride indeed.
I've enjoyed this episode so much. I really, again, look forward to whatever Martin McDonagh is going to do next. I haven't really researched that so much, and that's probably going to be my next bit of research. I guess to end the episode, let's tell them what we got coming up next.
Coming up next, the final week of Directors Month is my pick. This gentleman is probably one of the greatest living directors of all time, in argument as one of the greatest directors to have ever lived. His career spans 50 years at this point, maybe 60. And he's basically rewritten the gangster genre in that time, and that is Mr. Martin Scorsese. And we're going to be watching the movie everybody says is his greatest work, and the movie he actually won something for. We're going to be watching Goodfellas and The Departed.
Definitely excited for this.
I'm very excited. I'm a huge Scorsese fan. Him, Kubrick, they're always on my Mount Rushmore for like favorite directors.
Yeah, I would say they are on like the Mount Rushmore for like the best directors ever, as anybody would say. I've been particularly interested. I've been doing
Or
a
at
lot
least
of research
American
this
directors,
month
yeah.
on Martin Scorsese's documentary career.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one thing I'm going to research a lot going into these, because I think that has a heavy influence on Goodfellas.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in Goodfellas that we're going to be looking at. A lot, because there's a lot of like cinema verite going on. It's very interesting. It's not his first gangster flick. We actually saw his first gangster flick. We saw Mean Streets in was it The Egyptian?
Yes.
Yeah.
A classic Hollywood movie experience.
It was great.
Yeah.
So that's going to be kind of fun. So be prepared, everyone. We're going to be talking about Scorsese, kind of his oeuvre, his career, things he likes to go back to, and 2 movies that arguably are some of the best movies ever. Yeah. So there you go, everyone. But David, where can people find us if they wanted to keep up with us? What else do we got going on?
Right. So we have a YouTube channel. If you didn't know, it's called In the Frame. That's where we post the podcast and some other things, along with our other show, Too Obscure for TV. You can follow us there on YouTube, and if not, you can find us on any podcast player that is popularly known in the universe, that including things like Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc. You can find us on Instagram as well if you want to keep following along with us to keep notified with everything we do. Dean, they can follow us at
_podcast. And I know our Instagram's been a little light as of late, but we're going to be throwing up a lot more stuff. We're going to be a little bit more active on there.
Certainly. And other than that, thank you everybody for watching. Keep tuned with us for next week.
Hope you all have a good time.
Yeah.
Are you doing okay? You sound like you had a few too many to drink in Bruges, man. What the fuck are you gonna do in Bruges?
Exactly that. Have a few too many to drink.
All right.
Later
on, everybody.
See ya.
Peace.